So, you remember what I said earlier about the differences between gods and titans? Yeah, okay, so gods are more refined as a general rule. They have or can learn the skill needed to match divine energies with anything, and using their power is a lot less like driving around a wagon on square wheels. They can do things a titan could never dream of. But it's important to note that all that skill comes at its necessary cost. They don't have the same raw power. Rough as it is for them to use, in a magical arm wrestling contest, a titan will beat a god any day. It's simply a fact of their respective natures. The exception, of course, is Zeus. No. Okay, so this is absolutely a thing. Zeus was, to put it simply, built different. To put it even more simply, he was him. Not only did he have the usual godly refinement, using divine power was as easy as breathing for him, but he had this sheer raw magical might to step to any titan. There is a reason that all the old myths refer to Zeus as more powerful than the rest of the Olympians put together. And it's because he proved it. I don't know where he got those kinds of chops or how he avoided the trade off of power for skill. And I don't think either Rhea or Gaia knew either, but both of them were overjoyed when he started showing it. He was the perfect weapon. So, all of that makes it sound like this should be easy for him. Roll up to O3's, deck Kronos right in the glass jaw, take that sickle, cut his siblings free, and live peacefully and unchallengedly as king, right? Well, not quite. Zeus grew up to be both powerful and skilled. Yeah, but Kronos had several advantages. For one, he had the sickle. Not only a much more effective way of killing than either fists or magic, but a power amplifier on a divine scale. Nothing that lived could stand against him while he wielded it. Zeus needed a weapon. For another, Kronos had the rest of the Titans. His original brothers, yes, but also a whole crop of new ones, subjects to his rule and doers of his bidding. While not all of them were great shakes, some of them, like Atlas, had serious power in and of themselves, and there were many. No one, not Ornos at his strongest, maybe not even Chaos itself, could have beaten them as a combined force. Zeus needed allies. Fortunately, of the two things that he needed, one of them he knew where to find. His whole life, he'd been told about his brothers and sisters imprisoned in Kronos' stomach. If he could find some way to get them free, he'd have his allies, and they'd all have enough godly powers to be one quick training montage away from going toe-to-toe with whatever army Kronos could construct. Well, Zeus was down to just go in swinging. He knew about the sickle, of course, but he figured he could catch Kronos off guard or away from it, and even if he couldn't, it was difficult for him to conceive of a challenge he couldn't master. We'll never know how that would have gone down, though, because cooler head prevailed in the planning aspect. I think Gaia was strong enough to be talking by now, or maybe she was still making her will known silently and just really good at it. But she managed to convey to Zeus that he had to be sneaky about this. Yeah, the future Thunder God wasn't exactly interested in stealth, but he listened to his illustrious grandmother. He figured out how to disguise his power, make it seem as rough and unfinished as that of the Titans, and went up to the palace. A risky move, yes, but anything would have been, really. He knew that his father would never allow him to live should his existence be discovered, and everyone knows that nothing stays secret forever, and since immortals were involved, it really would have to be forever. So it was figure out how to destroy Kronos or die, and this was the way that was least likely to backfire horribly. He hoped. I don't know how he introduced himself. He picked a random name and said he was like the son of one of the Titans who lived far away, I guess. No one tried to call him out on it anyway. What reason would anyone have to lie? Yeah, lying was a widely understood concept by now. Remember when Gaia told Ornos that she wanted to smash and definitely wasn't planning murder? Even the slow ones twigged onto it at that point. But whether they understood lying or not, no one was expecting it. And if some of the cleverer Titans were somewhat suspicious of this random stranger insinuating himself into their society, they put their suspicions aside when he proved to be handsome, charming, personable, and entertaining. After the introductions were made, he showed off his juggling skills and did a few backflips for the crowd, and Kronos was so impressed he got hired as a cupbearer on the spot. Well, he hadn't gone in there with the intention of gaining access to the unguarded drinks of the being he hated most in the world, but he wasn't exactly going to turn it down now, was he? A windfall's a windfall. Now, I've read a few contradictory versions of what happened next. Some saying that he made his move that very night. Others that he waited years to build up trust before anything happened. It's probably somewhere in the middle of that, honestly. Zeus being patient for years seems somewhat unlikely. But Kronos, the crooked one, trusting him unconditionally, instantly seems even more so. There were probably a few weeks or months before Zeus figured he could get away with slipping something in the goblet. No, not poison. For one, it probably wouldn't have worked too well. Immortality is a good defense against assassination attempts. More importantly, if it did kill Kronos, it did certainly kill the defenseless young gods trapped in his stomach. Zeus didn't want that, so he had something different in mind. Two somethings, in fact. Well, it was a big party, a feast for some reason or another. Maybe it was the Titans' collective birthday or the anniversary of the day Kronos gave his dad the choppy chop or something, but everyone was there, and Zeus was cupbearer for the whole event. He was in top form the entire time, joking with the guys, flirting with all the ladies, keeping everyone's goblets topped off with nectar, generally just making sure everyone was enjoying themselves. The feast lasted long into the night, and by the time it was winding down, people were getting pretty sleepy. Some were even passed out on the lounge chairs, and a lot of others were well on their way. More than might be expected, even at so late an hour. Zeus, of course, was still lively as ever. So was Kronos, notably. What? Would he really do that? I mean, that's one hell of a conclusion to jump to, and spiking everyone's drinks would be one difficult endeavor. Do you really think that's what he was doing? Well, you're right. That was part of the cunning plan. Part 2 began right as Kronos started noticing that everyone around him was like unusually sluggish. Just as the "hey, what's going on" was leaving his lips, Zeus stepped up to offer him a very special goblet containing a little more than just nectar. Actually, I think I remember reading that the concoction inside it was mostly based on mustard seed, so it deeply amuses me to envision Kronos chugging a glass full of like Dijon mustard, but unfortunately, that's probably not exactly what happened. Fairly similar outcome though. What? No, Kronos yodeled groceries. No, that is absolutely what would happen if someone drank a glass of straight mustard. No one's keeping their dinner down after that. No, you could not. Fine then. Prove it. Prove it! No, you're the one who said you could drink it. So put your mustard where your mouth is and go get the condiment. I'll wait. I'm not drinking with you. I'm not stupid. You brought this on yourself. Oh, now you want me to keep telling the story? What, getting scared? Nah, we're gonna test this later. Don't think I'll forget. But fine, back to Kronos vomiting. First out comes the knight's ambrosia and nectar, then out comes a large rock, and then in reverse order of their birth, out comes Poseidon, Hades, Hera, Demeter, and Hestia, who immediately grew to full size. Kronos was moaning and groaning and clenching his gut and... Huh? Oh, yeah, the gods aged while in the stomach. They just couldn't grow. I mean, as soon as they were free, they were able to assume their true forms. Although, I assume there was like a decent learning period where they figured out how to walk upright, use their powers, speak with vocal cords, and all that stuff. It was really hard to do in a tiny cramped space. Ooh, that's a really good question. I don't know if being confined like that stunted their powers. I mean, that would be a good explanation for why Zeus was more powerful than all the rest of them, and also for why the eldest of them had the least power. Oh, usually it's like the opposite of that, but if it was dependent on how long they were imprisoned for... Well, that would imply that the gods' powers were constantly growing, at least for a time. But it would have to be like a long time, long enough to have 5 children after Hestia and for Zeus to grow up in like everything. The counterpoint to this whole thesis would seem to be that all of the gods' children, like Ares and Persephone, were significantly lesser in power than their parents, without any remarked upon proportionate increase in skill like the gods had to the Titans. But I suppose it's possible that the skill was some kind of fluke and power in all of them came from proximity to chaos. I'll have to think about that. I'm sure there's some kind of obvious proof for it or evidence against it I can't think of right now. I don't think I've ever seen any retelling of the story postulate that, though. That's interesting. What? Oh, sorry. I'm very skilled at going on tangents, not much else. Where were we again? Ah, yes. Okay, so Kronos was in, like, agony, rolling on the ground and holding his stomach, probably his throat too, and none of the Titans were anywhere near awake enough to do anything about Zeus grabbing his siblings and shepherding them away. Maybe he shapeshifted into a giant bird or something and carried them? I don't know. Through some method of conveyance, he removed them from the zone of danger and found a safe place for everyone to recuperate. Yes, here's the adjustment period. Teaching them to speak ancient Greek probably went pretty quick. These were divine beings, after all. Teaching them to use their powers, less so, because some things you just have to figure out almost entirely for yourself. Zeus did what he could, though. The gods learned to channel their divine energies, to shapeshift, and I don't know, what else did they do? Poseidon and Hades at least learned how to, like, punch really hard? The girls didn't get out of combat training on account of their gender, of course, but theirs was probably more magic focused. I mean, I haven't heard any stories about Hestia striking the ground so hard the earth split and a tidal wave poured forth, have you? Demeter wasn't exactly known for lifting mountains and throwing them at her enemies. Those 3 were certainly powerful, I mean, just in a different way. Well, whatever the case may have been, Zeus taught all of them to fight, and they took to their powers like gods to power. No, it's not redundant, it's self-defining. It tells you everything you need to know by telling you everything you need to know. Shush you. Which one of us is telling this story? Why do I keep having to clarify this? You are far too opinionated for your own good. Well, no, I'm allowed to be opinionated. I'm the one telling the story. You can keep your editorials to yourself. The disrespect! All right then, you tell the story. No, go on. What happened next? What did the gods and goddesses do to avoid the wrath of the Titans from there? Interesting idea. Interesting idea. Okay, and once they'd finished with that, somehow, I don't think the Titans would have been too impressed. Oh, come on, you know this. Think about it. What were the disadvantages Zeus needed to overcome? Precisely. He needed a weapon. And by now, the others needed weapons too. So where did they get them? Unfortunately, no. I don't think Gaia was going to be of much help anymore. The sickle was a one-time deal. Also, probably not. Of the other primordial forces, Pontus probably wasn't going to do much. Arnos was gone, and Tartarus had no reason to help either side. Although, come to think of it, now I want to know what kind of weapon Tartarus could make. What would that even be? The Sword of the Pit? The Spear of Hell? Dude, that sounds metal as fuck. I want one. What? Oh, yeah, okay, so no, there was no Scythe of Eternal Torment, unfortunately. The gods had to get their weapons from somewhere else, and he was reliably informed that whilst locked away in Tartarus's deepest, darkest, smelliest hole, the Cyclops had learned blacksmithing, and the 100-handed ones had learned the art of the stonemason. Actually, I don't know where he got that info. Maybe one of the Titanesses told him? I think at least one of them had, like, prophecy powers. More likely, now that I think about it, it was an Oceanid by the name of Metis who had the gifts of wisdom and farsight. She was very firmly on the god side, or at least on Zeus's. I guess it could have also been Gaia, but I hesitate to attribute too much to a being I've described so firmly as a very eepy ghoul. Feels vaguely inconsistent within the narrative I'm attempting to construct. I don't know, man. Sometimes this stuff contradicts itself. Sometimes I just plain don't know what happened. You may have noticed. There have been approximately 12 billion different versions of every single myth recorded down the generations, and I've only read like 11 billion of them. I'm trying to piece together the most common threads and the bits that make the most consistent sense, but that's a bit of an uphill battle. You could almost call it like a Sisyphean task. A task like that of Sisyphus. Never mind. Maybe I'll talk about him later. If I do like a Hades greatest hits highlight reel type thing. What matters now is that every single version of the story you'll ever find agrees precisely on what happened next. Zeus and company head down to Tartarus to go find the blacksmiths they needed. It wasn't an easy journey, no. Finding a way there in the first place was difficult, but shapeshifting made it possible. Once they'd made it into the pit, there were more monsters than you could count in a lifetime waiting to snack on immortal flesh. Tartarus had been busy. So I think he, created Nyx, the night, totally on his own. And then she created Hemera, the day, also alone. But then all of the monsters came from the union of Tartarus and Nyx, and the dark and the depths. Not super relevant, but possibly gross enough to be interesting? Yeah, me neither. The gods were also not fans of the whole arrangement and busied themselves sneaking past everything to get to the deepest possible part, because they knew that's where beings as powerful as their uncles would have to be imprisoned. When they got there, they realized that there wasn't very much down at the bottom of the pit except rocks, metals, and lava, which explains where the giants learned their trades, I guess, and the one very large monster from before, Camp. No one wanted to take her on. Zeus decided that stealth was, again, the key. Perhaps I should clarify. No one wanted to try to take her on before they had their weapons, which, reasonable. Okay, so while Camp was off bullying the hundred-handed ones, the hundos from now on, Zeus took the opportunity to sneak up to the Cyclops. Psst! Hey, you! Big guys, you like this pit? Not particularly. What are your feelings on sunlight? What is sunlight? It's like fire, but it doesn't hurt and it's even prettier. A small conference amongst themselves. We like sunlight. Sweet! If you can make us some weapons, we'll kill that big ugly monster and take you guys to see some sunlight. Your brothers too. You in? Okay. So now, the Cyclops had been imprisoned for years upon years for the simple crime of being ugly. A fact which Camp never felt the need to cease reminding them of. Hearing Zeus call something other than them ugly made them break out in the biggest, scariest grins you can imagine. I'm sure it was a glorious sight. Hey, I'm always a fan of a little well-deserved payback, and boy were the Cyclops ready for it. They'd wanted her gone for what seemed like an eternity. But every time one of them tried to build something that would work as a weapon, Camp interrupted before he could finish it. Even if he could complete it, the Cyclops had no powers other than their prodigious strength and skill at metalworking, and Camp was designed for killing. That wasn't a winnable battle. The arrival of the gods solved one of those problems neatly, though, and a quick idea from Zeus got the other. He suggested that each of them make part of a weapon, so it could be done before their warden got wind of it. The Cyclops closest to Zeus, I don't remember any of their names, I'm sorry, would then assemble it real quick and toss it over. They figured they could do this 6 times before there was any interference. No problem. Well, it started all right. The Cyclops worked quickly and efficiently. Somehow they seemed to instinctively understand the right implement of destruction to assemble for each god. Zeus got his first, of course, a jagged glowing spear, almost as tall as he was, and when he held it for the first time, the air around him crackled with power. He could work with that. Next was Poseidon's, a trident of gleaming silver and fathomless mystery. When he took it to handle, the earth shook. Why this didn't alert Camp, I don't know. Maybe earthquakes were fairly common in Tartarus, but Poseidon was well pleased. After them, Hades. He got something that was much less obviously a weapon. Just a helmet with what seemed like nowhere near the destructive potential. But as soon as it was in his hands, terror rippled through the air and the other gods fell back from him in fear. Putting it on his head turned him invisible, and the aura of fear around him only grew stronger. Hades saw the potential of all of this and smiled coldly, but no one could see it. So he took the helmet off and smiled again, just to make his point perfectly clear. Yup, the big 3, and as they'd come to be known, were now ready for action. And good thing too, because it was right around now that Camp figured out they were there. If I had to guess, I'd say she felt the fear from the Helm of Darkness, failed to recognize what emotion it was but knew she didn't like it, and decided to kill whatever was causing it. She found the gods' hiding place easily. Once she knew she was looking for someone and came on howling fit to give your nightmares nightmares. The gods were already nervy because of the hat, and the onslaught of this kind of monster was enough to make most of them break and run. Most of them. Not Zeus. Zeus had hidden all of his life. Now he was done hiding, and he was done running. He had a new weapon, a channel for his powers, a bolt of lightning held in his hands. It was time to find out what it could do. He met Camp's charge head on, spear in hand and glowing as he funneled everything he had into killing this monster that somehow had become the symbol for everything he couldn't fight before. His rage at his father, his frustration at being forced to live like a hunted animal, his desperation against forces he knew were more powerful than himself, it all went into the spear. And the spear responded, and the lightning came. Tartarus lit up. The brightest, purest white light the pit had ever seen turned its eternal night into day, just for an instant. And when everyone could see again, all there was, where a monster had once stood, was a pile of ash and cinders. Now they could take on the Titans. Zeus had his army, and he had his weapon. It was time for war. But first, it was time for grabbing the prisoners and getting out of there at all speed, because there were far too many monsters in Tartarus, and every single one of them was howling with fury at the intrusion into their domain. Yeah, nope. Maybe they could have 12v infinitied, but there was just no reason to try when instead they could just go take the fight to their real enemies. Oh yeah, Zeus explained that to the Cyclops and the Hundos that while the guy who locked them up originally was gone, Kronos had deliberately left them imprisoned and thus was deserving of their vengeance. The giants thought this over and agreed. Although it was probably mostly out of loyalty to the people who'd busted them out of prison. Oh yeah, I'm sure there was like a lovely, touching scene where the 6 of them got to see the beauty of the earth for the first time ever, got to feel warmth that didn't cause pain and touch green, living grass. Come to think of it, there was probably a similar scene shortly after the gods got out of Kronos' stomach. Maybe I should have talked about it then. Yes, feel free to imagine the tears streaming down their faces and joy in their hearts to your heart's content. Maybe there was like a cute little tableau where someone picked up a bunny rabbit and cuddled it for a while. Anyway, back to the world-spanning patricide war. Yeah, you'll deal with the emotional whiplash. You'll be fine. You know who might not be fine? The gods. It's now 12 against... shit, I don't even know how many. A few dozen at least. Probably less than 100? A lot. Well, it would have been more, but most of the nature spirits were trying to avoid getting squished and thus stayed out of it, and Rhea had been busy. Oh yeah, she came in pretty clutch here. Went around to a lot of the titans and titanesses to try to convince them to stay the heck out of it. Well, frankly, Kronos had not been a good king. People did what he said or they got stabbed, and that was the basis of his power. I don't think he committed any atrocities on his own people, aside from the baby incidents, but telling everybody, throw me a feast or you die, didn't make him super popular. To add to that, a lot of the nature spirits, even those that were the children of titans themselves, got treated like second-class citizens. I think there's like a story about him killing one of Metis' sisters because she cried in his presence. Which is why Metis joined Team God. Kronos didn't have many super fans. He did, however, have plenty of loyal subjects. Well, most of the guys stayed on Kronos' side, but the ladies weren't super violent in the first place and had no trouble promising not to fight. As for other non-combatants, a few notably powerful titans are relevant here. Helios and Selene, the sun and the moon titans, promised neutrality as long as Zeus promised to let them keep driving around the sun and moon chariots, which Rhea said he would. Prometheus could see the future and knew how it would all end, so he and his brother Epimetheus didn't get involved either. I'd like to point out that if he'd chosen to actually throw in on either side, it might have ended totally differently. But maybe there's some caveat to his powers, like it'll only happen if you're not part of it or something. I don't know. I should also say that for unknown reasons, he didn't attempt to convince his other brother, Atlas, of any such thing. Maybe they weren't on great terms. I hope they weren't, for Prometheus' sake, because otherwise, dude, that looks kind of bad, man. Throwing your bro under the bus like that? I digress. Oceanus was also fine with just chilling in the oceans, named after him, yes, and not causing problems. All of Kronos' greatest allies stood with him, though. While Rhea was trying to convince her sisters to give peace a chance, Kronos was rallying his brothers, the Titans of the cardinal directions, to come with him and hunt down the upstarts that would try to obliterate them all. While Rhea was negotiating with Helios and Selene, Kronos was getting Atlas, largest and strongest of them all, to serve as his general. When it all shook out, most of the physically powerful, personally dangerous Titans were standing with their king, while most of the smarter, or just less violent Titans were off on the sidelines. No one actually agreed to fight alongside the gods, I should note, which didn't do much to engender good feelings between the generations, but non-interference ensured their survival. Whoever came out on top. Well, now, each side was ready. Kronos had his sickle and his army of titans all fired up to kill the traitorous gods. Zeus had his siblings and his mighty uncles, and all of the big three had their Cyclops-forged weapons, each capable of causing problems on a massive scale. All that was left was the final climactic battle, right? And thanks to this week's patrons, Colby Walmsley, KirbyBoy564, Incarnus, and Sora. See you next week.